Hey Karen, welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. I'm so excited to have you. We've actually had a couple conversations before this, and we again run in similar circles, especially particularly in Broward College. So I've been a big fan of yours for a couple months now. And I do admire your work, and your personality is just overwhelming in a good way. And so I really want you to start off with kind of telling the audience about you, who you are, how you got into the biz, because it's such an intriguing and unique story, although to me, but maybe I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that are going to resonate with it. So I think it's really important for us to start there, and then we can move on to, all the good stuff.
I'm Karen, and I started in the legal field like back in 76. Okay, that does age me. Yes, this color hair is not because of that, but it was considered to be a very unique field at the time. In the 80s, I went to the University of Miami. Their law school actually had a paralegal program then. And from that, I got really hooked. I got hooked a little bit before that because I was a court reporter. I
Oh, okay.
started out my journey as a court reporter,
Wow.
and it was fascinating to hear all the stories, but I kept catching myself going more into the stories about what the background was. And I remembered what this witness would say and how it paired with that witness. So therefore, when paralegal became something of a course study, I jumped on it. And I remember the very first time I told an attorney that I was working with that I was going to be a paralegal. And he said, "What is that? Is it like a paramedic?" And I said, and it kind of like took me aback. And I said, "No, it's more like a pair of socks. You need them every day."
There you go.
And
I like it.
it became a joke between us because really back in the 80s, it was a very difficult time for law firms as people were morphing out into um, specializations
Mm.
with regard to the non-lawyer role. And we have litigation support. We had more IT support coming in because computers became a part of our everyday life. And as that went, your marketing people came into play. And from what was considered a secretary's role, a legal secretary, morphed into someone who wanted to actually do more of the in-between work, not an associate level, but not a legal secretary. It took the two careers, the two paths to support the role.
Love it.
And it was quite challenging in the beginning to do that. And, once we all learned that we can help each other out and it divides the job, I mean, how much better can it get?
Absolutely. I agree with you on that.
So, things evolve and over a period of time, I've worked at some fabulous firms. But it's actually, my national certification with NALA is a 2-digit. And now
Okay.
we're up into like 6-digit national certifications or something. So I'm an old timer, and old timers do things differently. But what has so excited me about this profession and about the lane that I'm allowed to travel in is the e-discovery, because it changed everything for me. And I've always said that if the job ceases to be fun, I will don a bikini and sell hot dogs in Medley on the corner.
I
It's
love it.
fun. It's going to be exciting. Um, some days are mundane, but some days are off the chart. And with e-discovery, you're also realizing that what you're reading about in the news is what you already knew was happening
Mm.
because of all the technology advancements and the way that we can use it in the courtroom, in the pre trial stages. It's just fascinating to me because we've got so many new topics and every year those change. So that's kind of, kept me going throughout the years, and I get all excited about what's the new thing that I can learn. I know I hear you say it and I've said it as well. You have to learn something new every day.
Yes. It's
Some
important.
days, when I teach a class on e-discovery or a specific software, I always start out by saying, if you say to yourself, "I already knew that," that's what you learned today. That you already knew that. It's a validation for something that you had invested time in, and now you know it. But you're going to still pick up something around it. And I think that that's what we all do every single day if you enjoy what you do. And
Absolutely.
I thoroughly enjoy what I
Oh
do.
my God, yeah. I've seen you speak at, events and things like that. And the way you light up when you talk about what you do is so like, I don't know, contagious. I mean, for lack of a better word, and your beautiful smile, you just light up the room when you talk. And I think that's what's so, I don't know, that's what intrigues everybody, right? Because they're like, what is this new, it's not really new. It's been around forever, but you really took a liking to this topic that's not really spoken about, right? It's not really trained on. There's not a lot of classes on it. You have to really like, I don't know, find it, right? Find these classes. And
Once you get into the lane of e-discovery, it starts popping up everywhere. And, COVID 2020 taught us a lot. I'm having to learn to connect with people by looking at a screen. I'm a connector of eye to eye, and nothing thrills me more than starting a conversation on something that's crazy, and all of a sudden you see light bulbs go off in their eyes. It's
oh
like,
my God, the aha moments, right? I love those.
they get it, and this is so cool. And so that part of it has been challenging. But here's the great side. All these free classes that are out there, so that you can afford to pay for the ones that are going to advance your career. But all of these free classes every single day, I have to choose at 1 o'clock which one I'm going to do. There'll be 5 or 6 just on e-discovery, just on current cases. And it's the people that I used to pay $300 a day to go here. I'm now listening to them and able to chat with them by the Q&A components of Zoom. So that's the good part that we'll get back to.
Right. There's always pros and cons, I think, to anything, right? And 2020 has taught us just to kind of really live up to that expectation and really, hone in on what's the current narrative, what's, live in the day, right? Versus living in like the past or tomorrow. So let's get into that. Let's get into e-discovery, what it is, how you got into it, because, like I said, it is common to you because you do it every day, but not a lot of people know about it or what it is. So
we first started, and when you start out in litigation, you've got all your documents. Litigation, I love litigation. I do give credit to those that I worked with in my early stages. In the right spot at the right time. And I had great teams that I worked with that had high moral standings, high ethics, but were fun in what they did. And we worked very hard together. When you're in a good group like that, how can you not grow and not turn to love it, right? So that was my first big entry into litigation, the litigation component. Well, then all of a sudden in the late 80s, we started imaging documents. I'm thinking in the 80s, we imaged documents. And I built my first database with images and traveled with a laptop in 1990. So that was a turn completely. So we had the 50 boxes on the side, but I had it all in my laptop in a database that I could then search. That's really cool. So now we're traveling with our documents to depositions.
Without the boxes.
And those who could only play in the boxes were delayed, and we were right on top of it, and I could compare documents. So that was my first taste of it. And I really got excited over what you can do next. Well, then came in with the safe harbor in Europe and documents as they started to grow in different types of documents. Computerization changed how we did everything.
Right.
That being said, email with Zublake case, and I've met Laura. She's a forerunner in e-discovery, in my opinion. She's awesome. It was her case, and it was an employment matter. And she said, wait a minute, what about all the emails? And they all went, well, we printed them and gave them to you. And she said, no, we want the metadata. And so then metadata became one of my everyday words. Where does I had this discussion with someone the other day who was in the profession of 20 something years. And I said, well, where's the metadata behind this document?
Right.
And they didn't even know what I was talking about. And I thought,
Oh,
how
wow.
in today's time and not know that there's a trail following every single thing we do.
Right.
When you keep that in mind, then you bring in the social media. So social media first came into play with e-discovery when we started realizing that we had the right because that person gave away the privacy as they were posting it out for the world to see. So then you bring in technology pieces that can collect it. And that was fascinating to me. That literally with a touch of a button, I can run your name and I knew where you had searched on Google and were in chat rooms and what had been said. Nothing ever went away. And no matter what we thought when we hit delete, we all thought that we were safe.
Yeah.
Anonymity, that's that word that I love so much. That right to sit behind the keyboard and think that nobody can see you doesn't exist. And people will say the darndest things in writing that they don't think are going to exist. Now we go into the phases of social media. There's one company that I absolutely adore, ESI Analyst, and their software can take all these collections of social media and websites and all of this information that's on the internet about you. And it brings it all together into a timeline. From that timeline, now I can go out and say, Karen spoke to Jeremiah. Jeremiah passed the word on to Sarah. Sarah passed it on to, and so you can map out where all of the pluses and the minuses of the testimony has gone. That was fascinating to me that now I can track all of that down.
I hope we're scaring all of you.
Part of what when I teach, I say, my goal is to make it personal for you by the end of the discussion so that you're more aware of what your privacy really is when it's out there, that you understand that it's here to stay. Others will be seeing it, hearing it, and we're all a witness to that nowadays with how we've been labeled. And I hate what's going on, but it's, heaven forbid I should be held responsible for what I said when I was 17 and 18 years old. I know that my parents raised a really good girl, but I have no idea that at 62 years old, I'm going to be held accountable for my youth and my inexperience and those life changes. And that's what I want to make sure that when I speak to groups, they understand how important it is that you gauge your privacy. But from a personal side, you flip it around to what we all do for a living, and it's litigation. Baby, I want that. I want to know everything about you. I want to know what's going on.
Give me more.
And they do. And they continue to, so it's very interesting. And now you even talk about ephemeral data. When I first heard that phrase, I thought it had something to do with blood, ephemeral. That's an artery, right? No, it's not. It's not. Ephemeral data is something that we feel disappears. So ephemeral is like Snapchat, Confide, which I have not used, Wicker. There's tons of them out there. And we think, okay, it's going to go away. I can write that now. It's a text message. I can delete it. It never goes away. It's sitting on someone's server somewhere. Now, experts will say, yes, it has a shelf life. But if you're backing up networks, does it get captured on the network to be in a backup that never got deleted? So there's that conversation. We had to, in trying to get people used to e-discovery, we had to talk about the cloud. I had someone ask me one day, what is the address of the cloud? And it kind of took me back, and I said, the address of the cloud. And they said, yes, you keep saying our data's on the cloud now, but where is that? And I said,
Mm.
it does exist physically somewhere, but it's kind of like following you around anywhere you go. It's kind of like, oh, I don't even know how to describe that. How do you describe?
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe like Google Photos, you know, when you take a photo and Google like tells you exactly what day, time, where you were at the time that you actually took that photo. And Google Memories, Facebook Memory, a lot of people, you know, a lot of social media outlets have those memories. So I think that may be kind of how to explain it, but not like
But
really,
they don't,
because
they still
it's
don't
not
get
the
where,
same.
still don't get where their data is. Because
Yeah,
that's
it's just in the air, guys.
it's out there and you just got
That's
to
why it's
believe
called the cloud.
it follows you around.
Yeah,
And now we're even
exactly.
talking about sentiment analysis is the new buzzword that came out last year. This year, we've got even more. But that's where we can take conversations that are in text form and apply this analysis to it via the computer systems. And technology says that's a negative discussion regarding these phrases. That's a positive discussion regarding these phrases. Well, when
Wow.
a technologist looks at a computer and it tells the computer is speaking to us, telling us which documents are important now. So doc review has changed tremendously over technology advancements. So
Wow.
e-discovery kind of came in and said, okay, we're going to collect your email. Okay, we're going to collect your servers. We're going to get rid of all the documents that don't have anything to do with this, but we're still going to have a copy of them just in case.
Just in case.
And then so many of our companies, our big corporate structures, move their data overseas. So now you have European law that regulates what we in America can do with documents that are in Europe.
Wow.
Witnesses that are in Europe. So it's
Never ending.
every single day I learn something else that I go, I don't understand that, but now I got to read it. I'll attend another webinar and I'll figure it out. So it's really cool. And what we've been able to do with it, I've seen great success out of it. It's a lot of responsibility to manage the collection. And if it's not collected properly, then you screwed everything up, because it all goes back to the metadata, the magic word of what is attached to every single thing we do.
That's crazy. I mean, it's, you know, it may be scary and daunting to people, right? Because to know that your privacy is no longer private, really. And, you know, that goes back to like kind of like my mission to educate the general public about what they're signing for, what they're clicking on, you know, day to day, and things like that. So definitely this kind of highlights all of what I've been trying to say for 4 or 5 years now, on my podcast and YouTubes and all that. So definitely thank you for that. But a lot of people I know, because most of the paralegals I coach always confuse e-discovery with kind of like a private investigator sort of deal. So kind of clear the air on that, because I know that's one of the questions I always get. Like, what's the difference between the private investigator and an e-discovery? Of course, there's a difference. So go ahead.
I also get, oh, I e-file. So I have electronic documents because I e-file. No, it's totally different. So where they differentiate is an investigator. In the state of Florida, I have not checked this year, so it may have been changed, but in the state of Florida, to collect data, you do not have to be a private investigator. In some states, in order to have your license to collect data, that's a forensic examiner, they have to have also a license for private investigator. So that's the way that stands now. It's different in every single state. We have the federal rules that apply to e-discovery. We have the state rules, and then you have your local rules.
Right, like anything else.
Everything else, just like everything else. But it's very important to know all of those things, because they don't contradict each other, but there may be a little loophole that your opposing counsel can sneak through. So you want to make sure of that. So how they differ. Okay, private investigator can go out and they take the photographs. They do the recording. They do the investigation. E-discovery is collecting all that they have done and puts it in a discoverable fashion, a manner in which you produce it to the other side. You build your storyline, you have your timeline, and then you have the documents attached to each event within that. You have all the analysis through the AI components of the technology to say, this guy was pushing out this information piece to all of these people. So it's taking what is gathered by a private investigator, possibly, but mainly it's you have a responsibility in litigation when you
Yeah.
file a litigation to have a legal hold on all your documents. You can't destroy anything.
Right.
So you have to push out legal hold has more emphasis than it ever has because of e-discovery. So as a paralegal, as an e-discovery specialist, I have both hats, but truthfully, I wouldn't even know how to go back and be a paralegal now. I say back that way. I say that I don't have the same level of experience with being a paralegal. I forgot about filing dates. I forgot about I can't e-file, but e-filing, I remember when it came in a few years ago, it was like chaotic.
Yeah.
People having to learn it, and it was so frustrating. The systems weren't working. We've done all of that with e-discovery too, and we've made some huge mistakes of producing things that inadvertent productions. That's where you pull back with your clawback, your 502 rule, and you got to know how far you can push it. But the sky is the limit with
Yeah.
what your evidence is now.
Yeah.
And that's all because people sit behind a keyboard anonymously and they write things because you're not saying things eye to eye and being able to talk about, you don't
Yeah.
see it very much anymore. You see it all
I
in
know
the
we always see it like online bullies, right? It's kind of what we call them. And then they try to hide behind a keyboard, which technically you're not. So, just shout out to you. So having said that, and having changed the narrative, right? Because you've been in this for so long. We're not going to say how long, but you've been in it for so long. Where do you actually see it going? Like, how do you see this, especially now that everything's virtual and we don't know when that's going to, person to person interactions are going to happen, in a safe and amicable way. So where do you see the future of e-discovery and maybe putting limits, right? Because now that everything is virtual, do you foresee any limits at any point?
No, I don't. I know that, they are very good at updating the rules that apply. Places that are coming out, the EDRM that's out there with, if you're not familiar with the EDRM, we'll make sure that you can get it on certain sites. It's been around forever. George and his group did an excellent job in building that. All it is a timeline of how you follow through on things. And it's all having to do with e-discovery. That's changing too, because the types of data that we have changes, especially with everything being remote now. That's been the interesting part because everything is recorded. Whether you think it is or not, it doesn't matter because it is. So when you have corporations performing their most important board meetings and technology meetings and they're going over plans for construction. I mean, it hits everywhere. So that type of data is now out more on the Internet of Things than it ever has been. Yes, you can work on privacy for the company. It's very important for privacy rules to be in place. That has to do with also your employment agreement. If you're an employee at a company like that, they have social media clauses in employment agreements.
Yeah, that's true.
What you can or cannot do. That's important too. So if we have all of this information that's out there now, why not use it?
Right.
But it depends on which side of the case you're on.
Absolutely.
That's our favorite word in litigation anyways. It depends.
It depends.
Because if I can take meetings that are had on a product and someone says intentionally or not, well, so-and-so has a product just like that. We copied it over. We made it better. And we have a patent. But then again, then you can go back and have a trail of you go back to that person's collection, their custodial records, and you can look into it to see if anything ever came through on their computer. Because remember, it's never deleted either.
Right.
We can go into the delete folders, the forensic examiners can. So where we took a career that was, or a path that was litigation paralegal, we've now morphed into a combination role where we have more attorneys that don't want to practice as practicing attorneys. They'd rather do e-discovery. They'd rather do document review. Believe it or not, document review, even though technology has the advancements to be able to whittle down the sum of documents to be
I can see
reviewed.
that,
There's a
yeah.
lot of attorneys that want to sit. I mean, every single day there'll be 15 to 20 emails coming across looking for attorneys for doc review.
Wow.
So those attorneys, you know, once you got into the practice, you used to go into litigation and it was kind of like selling your soul to a point.
Oh my God, yes.
Because when you joined a big firm, you were a student of a certain year to make partner. You had to bill your 23, 25, 100 hours. And it was just such an imbalance of life itself.
Yes.
So now that we found out that we can kind of balance things and step back a little bit, we're still doing great jobs. Litigation is getting larger and larger. And now some big litigation has come to South Florida with regard to the MDL.
Yes.
And watching how e-discovery can be parts of that. So you take this career that I said I wanted to be a litigation paralegal in the beginning, because that was the fun stuff. It was the stuff in the news.
Absolutely.
Well, now it's gone to where I hear all of these reports about, so a criminal got caught because of a Ring doorbell.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had 2 officers who were murdered here because of a Ring doorbell. Now, the doorbell didn't do it, but the doorbell told the person inside that they were cops, and he fired through the door and killed them both. But you have technology that helps and technology that hurts. Our role as a paralegal is to gather, as an e-discovery specialist, is to gather it and to also make sure that we stay within the realms of the rules.
Yeah.
Because you can get a little carried away with what all I can do.
Right.
And
the access, right? So access to information doesn't necessarily mean that you can utilize it in every way, which form, just because you have access to it. I know a lot of private investigators in particular that kind of take advantage of their licensing sometimes, and they go a little too far and step over that line. But I think it's like anything else in the legal industry as paralegals. A lot of paralegals I know, especially freelance paralegals, they really walk that fine line between the legal advice and the, crossing, and it's dangerous. It gets dangerous, and there's serious repercussions for that. So,
you talked about freelance. Be careful. I went from court reporter to paralegal school to in-house, and stayed about, not in-house with corporate, in-house with a law firm for a couple of years. And then I went, no, I want to go home and be mommy. So
I love it.
That was 36 years ago. And when I went home to be mommy, I realized I needed personally a little more. So I started reaching out to clients and became a contract paralegal. Now you call it freelance, and I did originally, but I wanted them to know that nothing about me was free.
Ah, okay, I like it.
I mean, if we're going to do this and I'm going to work for you, then there has to be a payment structure. Well, then they look at you and they say, well, I don't know how to pay you because you're not my employee. And I say it's a contract, and I work under your license and under your authority, because otherwise I have to, and I do carry my own liability insurance, but there's all these things to think about.
Right.
So contract workers became something that no one in our industry had ever thought of.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Years ago, and I would say to them, you don't pay me any benefits.
Exactly. So you're saving all of this money.
When I bill you at this rate and you bill the client at this rate, that's a great profit margin for you.
Absolutely.
So that's how it all started out, with contract work, independent work. And then when we realized it was getting more complicated, and now we have all these contract attorneys doing work in ESI and doc review, because that's how they choose their practice. And that's the benefit of having the background, as having a JD and being barred, is that they've gone through all of that. but now they're leaning into sales positions.
Hmm.
They're leaning into the e-discovery world as specialists. So it's very interesting to see that change. So where we went from independent paralegal, coming from a structured environment to be a little outside the box, then with e-discovery coming in on it, it just opened up a channel of never-ending sources of different types of work patterns for people. And,
Absolutely.
and I absolutely love every minute of it. And it's fun to be able to talk to people and say, yay, I read your post, and they get all excited they have all these people following them. And I say, but you don't know what they did when they shared it and what they added. And then
Mm.
it was like, I was just speaking to someone at a meeting and I said, remember we used to play Tell a Secret and it goes around the room? And he
Yeah.
said, it was called telephone in my generation.
Yeah,
And
me too. I was
but
gonna say, I'm like, is that telephone?
you tell a friend who tells a friend who tells a friend. Well, that's what we're doing on the internet with pieces of information. So
In writing.
in writing, exactly, and so easily collected. So it's very interesting that when you have all of this data, but now we can rely on technology to analyze it for us. And that becomes a little scary too,
Yes.
because I had to train the computer to think like me.
Mm.
You know, we see robots and things now. There's robots
Mhm.
ethical, and which is a whole nother cool part of litigation. You know, coming possibly class actions. So when you see that technology is brought in a physical component such as
Mm.
that, you realize that's what's in our computers as well. So
Mhm.
the technology that it's in our hands, as we've all said, you know, you pick up your phone and you've got more than my first computer right there on my phone, and it attaches to an endless source of data.
Mhm.
So there have to be some guidelines as to the data that's kept. I think that's too far out of the barn at this point. It's never going to happen. So when I
Yeah.
talk to people, I just say, be conscious of your social footprint.
Mhm. I
And
know
I
it scares me when I see people posting pictures of their children and, things like that. And it's like you're already giving them a footprint, right? Without even them even knowing about it. But that's a conversation. We can go on about that. I watched The Social Dilemma and other similar
oh,
documentaries regarding like the data and the access of data, which I obviously was eye-opening for me. Even me being in the legal industry, I've learned every day we learn, right? We just spoke about that not too long ago. But I want to talk more about maybe personal, right? Because you went through a lot of personal challenges. And I know you wanted to share that through conversation. And I think it's really relevant for anyone out there that's going maybe through similar or, in the realm of that experience. So that's definitely something I want to go over before we head out.
right. So just briefly, I wanted to talk about how we decide every single morning how we want to face the day.
Mm.
And my great sister told me when I was going through a lot of challenges in the last couple of years, she said, you have an option. When you wake up in the morning, first you have to say thank you.
Mm.
And then you get to be powerful or pitiful.
Mm.
You get to choose which one you want to be.
Mm.
So I think we all need to take that also back to the jobs as well as our life. I mean, tie these two together. I can be powerful in my position, or I can be that pitiful person who never gets recognized.
Mm.
I have always been the one that jumps out in front of people, wanting to start a conversation. You know, for a while, my number one cocktail line was, what four-letter word can replace busy?
Mm.
Or what four-letter words do you use every day that are negative? Not those
Mm.
four-letter words when we hear those, but how do we impact our lives by what we say?
Mm.
So a lot of me, I worked with Robert Friedman, and we were partners, and we started Legal Learning Series together. And we would run conferences once a year, twice a year with 300 people in the room. And I'd have to manage the room on an 8-hour schedule, always in front of people. I'm always in front of people. I like that. I thrive in that.
Mm.
I learn from that. And in June of, I'll get through this, in June of 19, I was used to being a power person, someone who was right in the midst of everything. And I was hit with an autoimmune disease, literally overnight. And in 10 days, just 10 short days, I lost all of my hair, my total body, and I have alopecia universalis. 7% of the world go to the degree that I'm in. Well, you don't really see bald-headed women, no eyelashes, no eyebrows, um, in the workplace.
Mm.
Not then. And that was a shame that I had to figure out if I fit back into my circle,
Mm.
if I could still walk the same, and dealing with the physical part of it.
Right.
The emotional battle that I went through was horrific. Learning to live as a different person
Mm.
and still doing, when I opened my mouth, I was that e-discovery person that could talk all day, but I was terrified that someone would see me. So being on your station today it's it's very challenging for me. So I took the bull by the horn.
Mm.
Fortunately, so COVID comes in. So I've had a whole year of everybody looking different behind the screen, right?
Exactly.
People wear t-shirts to work or a baseball cap, or so I could wear my scarves and my big earrings and not feel like the odd man in the room. So
Mm.
that was how I took a pivotal point in my career. And also being 60, I was 60 when it hit, and looking at my professional life, how much more do I want to work? Because
Mm.
it does click in your mind, I'm tired, I'm burned out. When you get burned out in your job, you need to figure out something that makes it exciting and go down that lane of it. And that's the cool thing about e-discovery with paralegals is you can go all kinds of places.
Right.
Well, my alopecia, fortunately, I was provided with an opportunity, and I am number 247 is my number
Ooh.
of a medical study in the United States. And we are taking a drug that they're testing. So my prayer, and so this little fuzz that you see is awesome. It came in
Gorgeous, by the way. You look
just
gorgeous.
that's fine.
I love it.
This is the new me. And a friend of ours on the board at BCC the other day said, "No, you look like a punk rocker." And I went, "Okay,
Yeah.
yeah." But you take the challenge that's in front of you, whether it be physical, emotional, professional, and you say, these are my worlds that are always together. So let me do what I need to do to get through it. And you rely on your background of the people that you've put in your life. So for young students, when I'm mentoring, we're both so blessed to be mentors
Amen.
for our college. And what you do with that is you say, take it seriously. Take your job seriously.
Mhm.
Don't say that it's a life balance unless you really can define your goal set for what that balance needs to be for you.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
can't hold anybody else responsible for making it. You have to do it yourself. And we hear all those kumbaya moments, and I get so tired of those. But in actuality, being a paralegal in e-discovery has given me so many different ways to go. I can be the wizard behind the curtain who's never seen.
I love it.
So
I love that.
when my medical trial is over, I will not be able to stay on the medicine. So for those of you that are seeing this, you might see me next year bald again. But baby, I'm a good looking bald 62
That's
year
right.
old.
Sexy. You're sexy.
I
It
am.
doesn't matter.
In going to that and giving it sounds funny, giving my body to medical science. I'm not dead yet, but in doing that and trying the medicine out, my hope was that I can go through some side effects. If it helps someone else in 10 years, that a child does not have to go through this, because I did it as a child and it was very traumatic. So on the personal side of what we do, it's not just surviving a situation that has turned your world upside down. It's thriving in it and figuring out, but you can be powerful or you can be pitiful.
I love it.
And it's okay to be pitiful once in a while. That's what I had to tell myself. So I just told my mentee this morning, he's having a really tough adjustment. You get to a burnout factor, and it's okay to crawl back and say, Today, I just don't want to do this.
I'm
I
done.
go build a sandcastle and get sunburn and then complain about it later. That's just, you've got to allow yourself those opportunities. Otherwise, when something, an event hits, you don't ever come back. And so fortunately for me, I'm in a path that I absolutely adore. The people that are the head, the power shaker movers, whatever you want to call them behind eDiscovery, are incredible sources of information. And they're so willing to help and reach out. So there's so much opportunity to grow in eDiscovery. And it was a cool path for me. And I really want to turn people on to, one, be socially responsible. Two, make sure you know what your social footprint is. And that does include having a plan for your data when you're gone. That is a very important part of what we're putting on the internet. Who really owns what's out there? And when I pass to the next world, what am I leaving this one? Do I have the right for someone to remove my footprint?
That reminds me of a similar situation. When my dad passed away, he had a Facebook page. And so it was really hard to see people posting on his page, not knowing what was going on. So I had to read up on how to make it, I think it's called like a memorabilia page, like convert it. Instead of a profile, I had to be converted to like memorabilia where people can just continue to post, but that I would kind of manage it, right? So I had to figure that out and do a little eDiscovery on how to, really change that. And I had to provide them, obviously, the death certificate, the proof that I was the daughter and all that good stuff. And I went through a lot of legal challenges because I do have a sister from my dad's side that's older than me and things like that. And knowing, my whole point to this is knowing the legalities of your footprint, whether it's digital, whether it's through power of purchase, whether it's through anything that you feel is important to you and that you do every day, knowing the legalities and the repercussions that come behind all of that is, if not one of the most important things. And I think that's what this conversation, and this is a good ending to it, I think this is where the conversation really lies in, right? eDiscovery is wonderful to know, to work in, and things like that, but it is also dangerous for the people on the other side, depending on what side you're on. So this is more of
both sides.
Yeah, exactly. So it really depends on how you look at it. Life is all about perception, right? So it depends on how you perceive things, how you look at things. And, we all come from different backgrounds. We speak different languages. We have different skills. And it's up to us to, at the end of the day, learn as much as we can, a little bit of everything in order to really be a full functioning I don't want to say citizen because I feel like that's kind of weird, but person, just, human on this earth, and leaving your footprint, whether it's digital or whether it's physical, right? So with that note, I want to thank you, Karen, for joining me on this amazing, oh my God, I got like the chills like 7 times. I didn't even want to interrupt you because just how you speak is so inspiring, and it inspires me, and I'm sure it's going to inspire many others that are going to watch or listen to this, or both, because I've seen people do both. And I just, thank you. Thank you very much for all you do, for sharing your story, for sharing your experience, because at the end of the day, our time is worth more than money.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
I love it.
And where you choose to place your words.
Oh my God, so powerful.
Your words that live forever. That's the way it is.
It is. Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much.